Hi, first graders. The last chapter was really long, I know, and this chapter is short, so I'm just going to go ahead and read it. And again, it's chapter 14, and it's called Dr. Dorian. I wonder whose doctor it is. The next day was Saturday. Fern stood at the kitchen sink drying the breakfast dishes as her mother washed them. Mrs. Arable worked silently. She hoped that Fern would go out and play with other children instead of always heading for the Zuckerman's barn to sit and watch animals. "Charlotte is the best storyteller I ever heard," said Fern, poking her dish towel into a cereal bowl. "Fern," said her mother sternly, "you must not invent things. You know spiders don't tell stories. Spiders can't talk." "Well, Charlotte can," replied Fern. "She doesn't talk very loud, but she does talk." "What kind of story does she tell?" asked Mrs. Arable. "Well," began Fern, "she told us about a cousin of hers who caught a fish in her web." "Don't you think that's fascinating?" "Fern, dear, how could a fish get in a spider's web?" said Mrs. Arable. "You know it couldn't happen. You're making this up." "Oh, yeah, it happened all right," replied Fern. "Charlotte never fibs. The cousin of hers built a web across a stream, and one day she was hanging around on the web, and a tiny fish leaped into the air and got tangled in the web. The fish was caught by one fin. Mother, its tail was wildly thrashing and shining in the sun. Can't you just see the web sagging dangerously under the weight of the fish? Charlotte's cousin kept slipping in and dodging out, but was beaten mercilessly over the head by the wildly thrashing fish, dancing in, dancing out, throwing—" "Stop!" Fern snapped her mother. "Fern, stop it! Stop inventing these wild tales." "I'm not inventing. I'm just telling you the facts." Okay, imagine what her mother might be thinking right now. But boy, isn't Fern a great listener? She retold those details beautifully of what Charlotte was telling. Amazing. "Okay, well," said Fern, Charlotte's cousin won. She wrapped the fish up and then she ate him when she was good and ready. Spiders have to eat the same as the rest of us." "Well, yes, I suppose they do," said Mrs. Arable rather vaguely. "Charlotte has another cousin who is a balloonist, and she stands on her head. She lets out a line and she's carried aloft in the wind." "Mother, wouldn't you simply love to do that?" "Well, yes, I would, come to think of it. But Fern, darling, I wish you would play outdoors today instead of going to Uncle Homer's barn. Find some of your playmates and do something nice outdoors. You're spending too much time in that barn. It isn't good for you to be alone so much." "Alone? Alone? My best friends are in the barn cellar. It's a very sociable place, not at all lonely." Fern disappeared after a while, walking down the road toward Zuckerman's. Her mother dusted the sitting room, and as she worked, she kept thinking about Fern. It didn't seem natural for a little girl to be so interested in animals. I don't agree with that. Finally, Mrs. Arable made up her mind. She would pay a call on old Dr. Dorian and ask his advice. She got in the car and she drove to his office in the village. Dr. Dorian, he had a thick beard, and he was glad to see Mrs. Arable, and he gave her a comfortable chair. "Well, it's about Fern," she explained. "Fern spends entirely too much time in the Zuckerman's barn. It doesn't seem normal. She sits on a milk stool in a corner of the barn cellar near the pig pen, and she watches animals hour after hour. She just sits and listens. Dr. Dorian leaned back, and closed his eyes. How enchanting, he said. It must be real nice and quiet down there. Homer has some sheep, hasn't he? Yes, said Mrs. Arable, but it all started the day we let Fern raise the pig on a bottle. She calls him Wilbur. Homer bought the pig, and ever since it left our place, Fern has been going to her uncle's to be near it. Well, I've been hearing about that pig, said Dr. Dorian, opening his eyes. Here's a picture of the mom having a conversation with Dr. Dorian. And you can see the author really described it well as he sort of leaned back, right? They say he's quite a pig, said Dr. Dorian. Well, have you heard about the words that appeared in the spider's web? Asked Mrs. Arable nervously. Yes, replied the doctor. Well, do you understand it? Understand what? Do you understand how there could be any writing in a spider's web? Oh, no, said Dr. Dorian. I don't understand it. But for that matter, I don't understand how a spider learned to spin a web in the first place. When the words appeared, everyone said they were a miracle, but nobody pointed out that the web itself is a miracle. What's miraculous about a spider's web? Said Mrs. Arable. I don't see why you say a web is a miracle. It's just a web. Mrs. Arable sort of shifted a little uneasily in her chair. No, she replied. Dr. Dorian says, did you ever try to spin one? No, said Mrs. Arable, but I can crochet a doily and I can knit a sock. Sure, said the doctor, but somebody taught you, didn't they? My mother taught me. Well, who taught a spider? A spider knows how to spin a web without instructions from anybody. Don't you regard that as a miracle? I suppose so. I never looked at it that way before. Still, I don't understand how those words got into the web. I don't understand it, and I don't like what I can't understand. Well, none of us do, said Dr. Dorian, sighing. I'm a doctor. Doctors are supposed to understand everything. But I don't understand everything, and I don't intend to let it worry me. Mrs. Arable sort of fidgeted. Fern says the animals talk to each other. Dr. Dorian, do you believe animals talk? I've never heard one say anything, but that proves nothing. It is quite possible that an animal has spoken civilly to me and that I didn't catch the remark because I wasn't paying attention. If Fern says that the animals in Zuckerman's barn talk, I'm quite ready to believe her. Perhaps if people talked less, animals would talk more. People are incessant talkers. I can give you my word on that. Well, I feel better about Fern. So you don't think I need to worry about her? Does she look well? Oh, yes. Appetite good? Oh, yes, she's always hungry. Sleep well at night? Oh, yes. Then don't worry. Do you think she'll ever start thinking about something besides pigs and sheep and geese And spiders? Well, how old is Fern? Asked Dr. Dorian. She's 8. Well, said Dr. Dorian, I think she will always love animals, but I doubt that she spends her entire life in Homer Zuckerman's barn cellar. How about boys? Does she know any boys? She knows Henry Fussy, said Mrs. Arable. Dr. Dorian closed his eyes again and at this time went into deep thought. Henry Fussy? Remarkable. Well, I don't think you have anything to worry about. Let Fern associate with her friends in the barn if she wants to. I would say offhand that spiders and pigs were fully as interesting as Henry Fussy. Yet, I predict that the day will come when even Henry will drop some chance remark that catches Fern's attention. It's amazing how children change from year to year. How's Avery? She asked. Oh, Avery, chuckled Mrs. Arable. Avery is always fine. Of course, he gets into poison ivy and stung by wasps and bees and brings frogs and snakes home and breaks everything he lays his hands on. He's fine. Good, said the doctor. Mrs. Arable said goodbye and thanked Dr. Dorian very much for his advice. She felt greatly relieved. That's the end of that chapter. I'm actually going to go back for a second, sort of like what we're doing in Writer's Workshop. We revisit things, and there was something here that really struck me. Whoopsie daisy. And it was, right here. It's what the Dr. Dorian said. I think this is just really made me think of what's happening right now in our world. I've been seeing videos that since a lot of people are sheltered in place and staying home and not out driving around on the roads, that animals are coming out more and more often, right? It made me think of that. Let me reread that part. He says, if Fern says that the animals in Zuckerman's barn talk, I'm quite ready to believe her. People are incessant talkers. Oh no, that wasn't it. He says, yes. It is quite possible that an animal has spoken civilly to me and that I didn't catch it. I didn't catch the remark because I wasn't paying attention. Children pay attention more than grown-ups. I love that part. Again, it makes me think of how the animals are coming back now. I also agree with Dr. Dorian because I think all of you pay attention to what's important. All right, excellent. See you for the next chapter, which is called Crickets.